I speak 7 languages, the 11-year-old girl said, looking directly into the eyes of Marcus Sterling. The billionaire exploded in cruel laughter in front of all his executives. Emma, daughter of the janitor, didn't lower her gaze. What came from her lips next left him in complete shock. Marcus Sterling adjusted his $200,000 Patek Philippe watch while observing with absolute disdain the boardroom on the 45th floor of his corporate tower in the heart of Manhattan. At 52 years old, he had built a tech empire that had made him one of the richest men in America, with a personal fortune of $4.2 billion, but also one of the most arrogant in the country. His office was an obscene monument to his unbridled ego. Imported black marble walls from Italy, artworks that cost more than entire mansions, and a 180-degree panoramic view that constantly reminded him that he was literally above all the mortals, crawling through the streets like insignificant ants. But what Marcus enjoyed most wasn't his astronomical wealth. It was the cruel power this wealth gave him to humiliate and destroy those he considered inferior. "Mr. Sterling," his secretary's trembling voice interrupted his thoughts of superiority through the golden intercom. "Mrs. Johnson and her daughter have arrived for cleaning." "Let them in," he responded with a cruel smile spreading slowly across his tanned face. "Today I'm going to have some fun." For the past week, Marcus had been meticulously planning his favorite game of public humiliation. He had received, as part of a family inheritance, an ancient document written in multiple languages that the best translators in the city had declared impossible to decipher completely. It was a mysterious text, with characters mixing Mandarin, Arabic, Sanskrit, and other languages that even university specialists couldn't identify. But Marcus had turned this into his cruelest personal entertainment. At that moment, the glass door opened silently. Sarah Johnson, 38 years old, entered wearing her impeccable navy blue uniform, pushing her cleaning cart that had been her faithful companion for the past 7 years working in this building. Behind her, with hesitant steps and a worn school backpack, came her daughter Emma. Emma Johnson was 11 years old and the perfect antithesis of the obscene luxury world surrounding her. Her black shoes, though polished with care, had seen better days. Her public school uniform was patched but spotless, and her library books protruded from a backpack that had clearly been through several older siblings. Her large, curious eyes contrasted dramatically with the submissive, fearful look her mother had developed after years of being treated as invisible. "Sorry, Mr. Sterling," Sarah murmured with her head down, exactly as she had learned he expected. "I didn't know you had a meeting. My daughter came with me today because I have no one to leave her with. We can come back later if you prefer." "No, no, no." Marcus stopped her with laughter that sounded like a predator's bark. "Stay, this is going to be absolutely entertaining." He stood behind his black marble desk, his eyes gleaming with the cruelty of someone who had found new prey to torture. He walked around them like a shark circling, enjoying the obvious terror in Sarah's eyes and the confusion in little Emma's. "Sarah, tell your daughter what mommy does here every day," he ordered with a venomous smile. "Emma already knows, sir. I clean the offices," Sarah responded quietly, her hands gripping the cart handle until her knuckles turned white. "Exactly. Cleans." Marcus applauded sarcastically, his voice loaded with contempt. "And tell me, what's your education level, Sarah?" Sarah felt the heat of humiliation rising to her cheeks. "Sir, I finished high school." "High school? Just high school?" Marcus exploded in cruel laughter that echoed throughout the office. "And here you have your little daughter, who probably inherited the same mediocre genes." Emma felt something strange moving inside her chest. For years, she had seen how other children in her class lived in big houses, had new clothes, and their parents picked them up in luxury cars. She had accepted that her family was different, that they had less, but she had never seen anyone humiliate her mother in such a direct and cruel way. Actually, Marcus had an idea that seemed absolutely hilarious to him. "Emma, come here. I want to show you something." Emma looked at her mother, who nodded nervously, and approached the desk with small but determined steps. Despite her youth, there was something in her eyes that Marcus had never seen in Sarah's eyes, a spark of defiance that hadn't been completely crushed by poverty and circumstances. What could possibly happen when this powerful billionaire tries to humiliate an 11-year-old girl? The stage is set for a confrontation that will change everything. Look at this document. Marcus placed the ancient papers before her eyes like they were a dirty rag. The five smartest translators in the city can't read this. They're university doctors, professors with international degrees, language specialists who've studied for decades. Emma looked at the papers with genuine curiosity. Her eyes moved across the strange characters, the words and languages that seemed to dance between different writing systems. "Do you know what this means?" Marcus asked with a mocking smile spreading across his entire face. It was a rhetorical question, a cruel joke designed to demonstrate the obvious inferiority of this poor girl compared to educated academics. To his surprise, Emma didn't look away immediately. Instead, she studied the document with an intensity that was unsettling in someone so young. "No, sir," she finally responded quietly. "Of course not!" Marcus roared with laughter, banging the table with both hands. A 12-year-old girl from a janitor's family, while doctors with 30 years of experience also can't. He turned to Sarah, his voice becoming even more venomous. "Do you understand the irony, Sarah? You clean the bathrooms of men who are infinitely more intelligent than you, and your daughter will end up doing exactly the same thing because intelligence is inherited." Sarah clenched her teeth, trying to hold back tears of humiliation that threatened to spill. For 7 years, she had endured comments like these. She had developed emotional armor to protect herself from the cruelty of men like Marcus. But seeing her daughter being humiliated this way was different. It was a pain that cut deeper than any personal insult. Emma observed the entire scene with an expression that was gradually changing. The initial confusion was being replaced by something more powerful: indignation. Not for herself, but for her mother, who worked 14 hours a day to support her 3 children, who never complained, who always found a way to put food on the table and school supplies in their backpacks. But enough games. Marcus returned to his seat, clearly enjoying every second of his cruelty spectacle. "Sarah, you can start cleaning. And Emma, sit there quietly while the important adults work." "Excuse me, sir." Emma's clear, firm voice cut through the air like a sharp knife. Marcus turned, surprised that the girl dared to interrupt. His expression was a mixture of amusement and irritation. "What do you want, little girl? Going to defend Mommy?" Emma walked slowly across the office, her steps echoing on the marble with a determination that surprised everyone in the room. When she reached Marcus, she looked directly into the eyes of an adult who was trying to intimidate her. "Sir," she said with a calm that contrasted dramatically with her age, "you said the best translators in the city can't read that document." Marcus blinked, confused by the confidence in this child's voice, who should be trembling with fear. "That's right. So what? And can you read it?" The question hit Marcus like an unexpected slap. Throughout his entire life, he had used his wealth and position to intimidate others, but he had never claimed to have specific academic knowledge. His fortune came from smart investments and cruel business decisions, not from higher education. "I... That's not the point," Marcus stammered, feeling for the first time in years that he was losing control of a conversation. "So you also can't read it," Emma declared, with simple but devastating logic. "That makes you less intelligent than the doctors who also can't." Sarah gasped. In 11 years of life, she had never seen her daughter challenge an adult this way. And she certainly had never seen anyone, child or adult, put Marcus Sterling in such an uncomfortable position with a simple question. An 11-year-old girl just logically dismantled a billionaire's argument. But this is only the beginning. What Emma reveals next will shake the very foundation of Marcus's world. Marcus felt his face reddening, a mixture of rage and something he hadn't experienced in decades: shame. This 11-year-old girl had just exposed the fundamental hypocrisy in his logic with the brutal clarity of innocence. "That's completely different," he roared, his voice increasing in volume to compensate for the weakness of his argument. "I'm a successful businessman. I'm worth almost $4.2 billion. But does that make you more intelligent?" Emma asked with the same unshakable calm. "My teacher says intelligence isn't measured by how much money you have, but by what you know and how you treat others." The silence that followed was so profound, you could hear the air conditioning humming. Marcus found himself completely disarmed by the simple but impeccable logic of an 11-year-old girl who had just destroyed his central argument with surgical precision. Sarah looked at her daughter with a mixture of terror and pride. Terror because she knew Marcus Sterling had the power to destroy their lives with a single phone call. Pride because, for the first time, she was seeing her daughter stand up for herself and, by extension, defending their family's dignity. Besides, Emma continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, you said I couldn't read the document because I'm a janitor's daughter, but you never asked me what languages I speak. Marcus felt a strange chill running down his spine. There was something in the way Emma had pronounced those last words that gave him a bad feeling. What languages do you speak? He asked, though he was no longer sure he wanted to hear the answer. Emma looked directly into his eyes with confidence that seemed impossible in someone so young. I speak native English, advanced Spanish, fluent French, intermediate Italian, conversational German, basic Mandarin, conversational Arabic, and beginner Russian. The list came from her lips like a powerful sequence, each language pronounced with precision that made Marcus's jaw slowly drop. That's 8 languages, Emma added with a small but triumphant smile. How many do you speak? The question hung in the air like a bomb about to explode. Sarah had been paralyzed, not only by the shock of hearing her daughter enumerate languages she didn't even know she knew, but by the realization that the power dynamic in the room had just completely changed. Marcus opened and closed his mouth several times like a fish out of water. For 52 years, he had used his wealth as both shield and sword, intimidating others with his financial success. He had never found himself in a situation where an 11-year-old girl had intellectually surpassed him in public. That's, how, he stammered, all his arrogance evaporating. Would you like me to try reading your document? Emma asked with a courtesy that somehow made the offer even more devastating. Maybe I can help where the doctors couldn't. And in that moment, Marcus Sterling realized he had made the gravest mistake of his life. He had completely underestimated the wrong person and was about to discover that some humiliations you can't buy your way out of. 8 languages? From an 11-year-old girl from a poor family? Marcus's world is crumbling, but wait until you hear what happens when Emma actually tries to read that impossible document. The silence that followed Emma's question was so dense it seemed to have physical weight. Marcus Sterling, the most powerful man in New York, found himself completely paralyzed by an 11-year-old girl who had just shattered his logic with the brutal simplicity of truth. His hands trembled slightly as he processed what he had just heard. 8 languages. A girl who supposedly should be grateful for crumbs of public education had declared she spoke 8 languages, more than he could learn in his entire lifetime, even with all his billions. That's impossible, Marcus finally stammered, his voice sounding strangely weak in the room he had specifically designed to intimidate. Where? Where did you learn all this? Emma looked at him with an expression that was a mixture of patience and determination, as if explaining something obvious to an adult who hadn't been paying attention. At the public library, Mr. Sterling. They have free language programs every day after school. There are also videos on the internet, free apps, and books anyone can borrow if they're curious enough to learn. Each word was like a gentle but devastating slap. Marcus realized that while he had been spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on artwork no one saw, on exclusive restaurants where he flaunted his wealth, and on watches that cost more than Sarah's annual salary, this girl had been quietly building knowledge he could never buy. Sarah looked at her daughter with a mixture of amazement and terror. She had known Emma was intelligent, that she always brought good grades home, that she spent hours at the library, but she had never imagined the true extent of what her daughter had been learning in silence. The programs are run by immigrants living in the city, Emma continued with the same unbreakable calm. Mrs. Chen teaches me Mandarin on Tuesdays. Ahmed helps me with Arabic on Thursdays. Maria teaches me Italian on Saturdays. They're people who, like my mother, have simple jobs but know incredible things. Marcus felt nauseous. This girl had just described a learning network he had never known existed. A community of people he had automatically dismissed as inferior, but who apparently possessed knowledge that rivaled university professors. But that doesn't mean you can read a complex academic document, Marcus said, desperately clinging to any fragment of superiority he could maintain. Speaking basic languages isn't the same as understanding specialized ancient texts. You're right, Emma nodded, surprising him. That's why I also study in the classical languages section of the Columbia University Library on weekends. The librarians let me in because I always return books on time and never make noise. Marcus's jaw dropped completely. The university library on Saturday mornings is almost empty. I've been reading about comparative linguistics, ancient writing systems, and language evolution for the past 2 years. It's fascinating how languages connect with each other throughout history. Marcus collapsed into his chair as if someone had removed all the bones from his body. This 11-year-old girl had not only been learning modern languages, but had been independently studying subjects that normally required graduate degrees to fully understand. 2 years, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I started when I was 9. My mother was working double shifts to pay for us to attend private school, but then she lost that extra job. When I returned to public school, I had a lot of free time because the classes were easier. So I decided to use that time to learn things that really interested me. Each word was like a direct hammer blow to Marcus's ego. He realized that while he was boasting about the higher education his money could buy, this girl was obtaining an infinitely more impressive education through pure intellectual curiosity and determination. Show me, Marcus said suddenly, his voice rough with emotion. If you really know all this, show me. Emma looked at her mother, who nodded nervously, and approached the table where lay the mysterious document that had defeated the 5 most prestigious translators in the city. She picked up the papers with steady hands and studied them for a moment that felt like eternity. Marcus could see her eyes moving across the strange characters, recognizing patterns, making connections that the university specialists had missed. It's interesting, Emma murmured, more to herself than to others. It's not a single language, it's a combination of several writing systems organized in thematic layers. Marcus felt as if the entire world was turning upside down. What? What does that mean? The document is structured like a linguistic puzzle. Each paragraph is written in a different language, but all paragraphs discuss the same theme from different cultural perspectives. It's as if someone wanted to preserve the same wisdom in multiple linguistic traditions. Sarah approached slowly, fascinated despite her terror. She had never seen her daughter speak with this academic authority, had never witnessed the true scope of her intelligence. Can you read it? Sarah asked in a whisper. Emma looked up from the document and stared directly at Marcus. Do you want me to try, Mr. Sterling? Marcus felt as if he were standing at the edge of a precipice. Part of him wanted to say no, wanted to maintain the illusion that this girl was just that, a child who had gotten lucky with some memorized phrases. But another part of him, a part that had been buried under decades of arrogance, was genuinely curious to know what this extraordinary creature would say. Yes, he murmured. Try. Emma returned her attention to the document and began to read. But what came from her mouth made Marcus completely freeze, because Emma Johnson, the 11-year-old daughter of a janitor, began reading the first paragraph in perfect classical Mandarin. Her pronunciation was impeccable, with tones that indicated not just knowledge of the language, but deep understanding of its cultural nuances. The words flowed from her lips like ancient music, charged with meaning and authority that seemed impossible in someone so young. She's actually doing it. An 11-year-old is reading what PhD scholars couldn't decipher. But wait until you hear what the document actually says. It will change everything Marcus thought he knew about success in humanity. Marcus had been left with his mouth agape, his expression of mockery transforming into one of absolute shock he would never forget. For 52 years, he had operated under the belief that real education, true intelligence, was only available to those who could pay for it. This girl had just completely shattered that belief, but Emma didn't stop there. When she finished the first paragraph in Mandarin, without even pausing, she moved to the second paragraph and began reading in classical Arabic with the same supernatural fluency. The words came from her mouth with a musicality that made Marcus feel as if he were witnessing something impossible. This wasn't a girl reciting memorized phrases. This was a genuine scholar who understood not just the words but the cultural and historical context behind each expression. Sarah brought her hands to her heart, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Her daughter, her little Emma, who helped wash dishes after dinner and did her homework at the kitchen table under a dim lamp, was demonstrating a level of knowledge that rivaled university professors. Emma continued with the third paragraph, this time speaking what sounded like ancient Italian. Marcus had no idea what she was saying, but he could hear the reverence in her voice, as if she understood not just the words but the spiritual and philosophical weight they carried. With each language Emma mastered perfectly, Marcus's humiliation grew exponentially. He realized that for decades he had been boasting about his superior education to employees like Sarah, when in reality Sarah's daughter knew more about practically any academic subject than he ever would. His world of certainties was crumbling word by word, language by language. Emma read the fourth paragraph in what sounded like Russian, her voice acquiring a different quality that indicated deep respect for the tradition she was representing. Then the fifth paragraph in classical German, followed by the sixth in French. When she finally finished reading, Emma looked up from the document and stared directly at Marcus. For the first time in his interactions with service employees, there was no submission in the eyes looking at him. There was something he had never seen directed at him, a deep, ancient, wise intelligence that had been hidden all this time behind economic poverty and youth. "Would you like me to translate the complete meaning, Mr. Sterling?" Emma asked with a calm that contrasted dramatically with the tremor that had invaded everyone present. Marcus tried to speak, but only a muffled sound came from his throat. His face had gone from red with rage to white with absolute shock. His hands were shaking, and he could feel cold sweat running down his back despite the office air conditioning. "What? What does the document say?" Marcus finally whispered. Emma placed the document on the marble table with reverential care, as if it were a precious treasure. Her movements were suddenly different. She no longer had the hunched posture of a girl trying to be invisible, but the erect posture of someone who knew their own intellectual worth. "The document speaks about the true nature of wisdom and wealth," Emma began, her voice clear and firm. "It says that true wisdom doesn't dwell in golden palaces, but in humble hearts. That real wealth isn't counted in coins, but in the ability to see dignity in every soul." Each word was like an arrow directed straight at Marcus's soul. He realized the document wasn't just a linguistic puzzle. It was a mirror reflecting exactly what he had become and what he had lost in the process. It says that he who believes himself superior because of his possessions is the poorest of all men, for he has lost the ability to recognize the light in others. Emma continued, looking directly at Marcus as she spoke. "What else?" Marcus whispered, though part of him no longer wanted to hear the answer. "That true power doesn't come from the ability to humiliate others, but from the ability to elevate them. And that when a powerful man discovers he has been blind to the wisdom surrounding him, that is the moment of his true awakening, or his eternal damnation." The room fell into absolute silence when Emma finished. Marcus realized he had not only been humiliated by an 11-year-old girl, he had been judged by her and found lacking in every aspect that truly mattered. He had found himself face to face with his own soul and didn't like anything he saw. Who, who are you, really?" Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible. Emma looked at him with an expression that was a mixture of compassion and wisdom that seemed impossible in someone 11 years old. "I'm exactly who you've always seen, Mr. Sterling. I'm Emma Johnson, daughter of Sarah Johnson, student at Lincoln Elementary School, and someone who believes all people deserve to be treated with dignity." As the sun set over Manhattan that evening, Marcus Sterling realized his transformation had only just begun. An 11-year-old girl had not only shattered his arrogance, she had shown him a path to becoming the person he was meant to be. The document's message was clear. True wealth isn't accumulated, it's shared. True intelligence isn't imposed, it's offered. And true greatness doesn't dominate, it serves. For the first time in decades, Marcus Sterling understood what it meant to be truly wealthy. And it had nothing to do with the numbers in his bank account. This was just the beginning. Marcus's journey from arrogant billionaire to humble servant of humanity was about to transform not just his life, but the lives of thousands of others. The real question was, Would he have the courage to follow through on the lessons this extraordinary 11-year-old had taught him? 1 year after the encounter that changed everything, Marcus Sterling stood in the same room where his transformation had begun. But it was no longer the same room, just as he was no longer the same man. The black marble walls had been replaced with large windows that filled the space with natural light. The expensive artworks had given way to photographs of scholarship recipients from his educational programs. And where once stood an intimidating marble desk, now there was a round wooden table where he met weekly with Sarah, Emma, and other community leaders to plan new initiatives. This morning was special. He was announcing the creation of the Emma Johnson Foundation for Human Dignity, endowed with $500 million, nearly half his personal fortune, dedicated to expanding educational programs throughout America. The transformation was complete, but the impact was just beginning. And it all started with a simple lesson about human dignity, taught by an extraordinary girl who had seen beyond appearances to recognize the potential for goodness that exists in every human heart. The story of the arrogant billionaire and the cleaner's daughter had become a testament to the power of humility, the importance of second chances, and the truth that real wealth can never be measured in dollars, only in the lives we touch and the dignity we restore. Based on true events that remind us that wisdom can come from the most unexpected sources and that it's never too late to change if we have the courage to listen.